The human colony had been silent for weeks. The sky above was filled with alien warships, their black metal bodies hiding the sun. Children no longer played in the streets, and parents spoke only in whispers. Fear had become the air they breathed. The ruler of this silence was General Kale. He was not a man, but a giant alien commander, his armor shining like the scales of some dark beast. His eyes were cold and sharp, like blades ready to cut through lies and weakness. Among his people, he was known for victory in every battle. Among humans, he was known for his strange law. The law was simple, yet terrifying. Share my bed, but never my heart, the general had said long ago. The meaning of these words was debated in every corner of the colony. Some thought it meant the general only took humans as trophies of war. Others believed it meant he feared love more than death. But no one dared to ask him directly. No one dared to break his rule. Then came the day when his guards entered the human quarters. Their boots echoed against the cracked stone floor as they walked among frightened families. One of the guards read a name, and silence followed. It was the name of a young woman, Lyra. She was ordered to come with them, and no one could stop it, her mother cried. Her brother tried to step forward, but soldiers pushed him back within minutes. She was taken from her people and carried to the general's fortress. The fortress stood like a mountain of black steel at the edge of the city. Its walls rose so high they touched the clouds. Inside, shadows moved across endless corridors. Strange alien flames burned blue instead of red. The sound of soldiers training and weapons clashing filled the halls. And in the center, in the tallest chamber, stood General Kale when Lyra was brought before him. She expected death. She expected chains or cruelty, but instead, the general simply studied her in silence. His expression gave away nothing. Finally, his voice broke the silence. Low and commanding. "You will live in my quarters," he said. "But you must obey the law." Lyra was confused. She had heard of the law, but to hear it from his own mouth made her blood run cold. "Share my bed, but never my heart," he repeated, as if it were not just a law but a curse. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Why me, General? Why choose me?" His eyes narrowed and he gave no answer. Instead, he turned away, dismissing the guards with a single gesture. The massive doors closed, leaving her alone in the chamber with the most feared being in the galaxy. That night, Lyra lay in a room that was both beautiful and frightening. The bed was vast, covered in silken sheets that shimmered like starlight. Strange alien carvings glowed faintly on the walls, telling stories she could not understand. But it was the silence that weighed on her most. A silence broken only by the steady steps of the general as he entered. He did not touch her, nor did he speak, he only watched, his piercing gaze holding her in place. It felt less like desire and more like judgment, as if he were testing her. Waiting for her to make a mistake, Lyra tried to stay strong. She told herself she would not cry. She would not show fear, but inside, her heart beat like a drum. She thought of her family, of the faces she might never see again. She thought of the stories whispered by others. Humans who had been chosen but never returned. Were they dead? Or trapped forever in this fortress? No one knew. At last Kale spoke again. His voice deep and calm. "You fear me," he said. "Not as a question, but as a truth." "Yes," she whispered, "I do." "Good," he replied. "Fear keeps you alive." He turned away once more, his shadow stretching long across the room. And with those words, he left her in silence. That night, Lyra did not sleep. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow looked like a threat. But the greatest mystery was the general himself. He had the power to destroy her, yet he chose not to. He had the chance to claim her, yet he held back. What was the meaning of his law? Why had he chosen her, out of all the humans in the colony? As the hours passed, one thought grew in her mind. The general's law was not just about control. It was about something deeper, something broken inside him. And if she could understand it, she might uncover a secret hidden even from his soldiers. A secret that could change everything. But for now, she was only a prisoner caught in the silence of a law she could not yet understand. And as dawn came, painting the fortress walls in pale light, Lyra knew her life had changed forever. The law of the general was no longer just a rumor. It was her reality. And survival would depend on how far she dared to test it. The first morning in the alien fortress was heavy and cold. Lyra woke on the wide bed, her eyes fixed on the strange glowing symbols carved into the walls. The silence was broken only by the sound of armored guards marching past her door. She remembered the words of the general from the night before. "Share my bed, but never my heart. The words repeated in her mind like a chain around her neck. When the doors opened, a servant entered. Not a human, but a smaller alien creature with pale skin and silver eyes. It brought food, strange fruits and glowing water. Lyra stared at it but did not eat. Her hunger was sharp, but her anger was sharper. Why should she obey a law she never agreed to? Why should she act like a slave in the house of her enemy? Later, the general entered, his armor polished, his cloak dragging across the stone floor. His presence filled the room like a storm. He studied her with the same silence as before, but this time Lyra did not lower her head. Instead, she stood straight, her voice steady. "I am not afraid of you," she said, even as her heart raced. The guards looked at each other in shock. No human had ever spoken to him this way. Kale's sharp eyes locked on hers for a moment. It seemed he might strike her down, but instead, a faint smile touched his lips. "You are brave," he said. His voice calm. "Or foolish," he added. "Maybe both," Lyra replied, her voice trembling slightly but holding firm. The general turned and dismissed his soldiers with a wave of his hand. When the doors closed, only the two of them remained. "You think courage will protect you," he said, his tone almost curious. "It will not, then let it kill me," she answered. "Better than living as a shadow?" The general's eyes narrowed, but he did not speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "I could destroy you with a single command, and yet you do not," she answered. "Why?" Her question echoed in the chamber like a spark in the dark. The general turned his back to her, his voice lower now. "Because my law forbids it." Those words burned in her mind. Why would he create such a law, only to bind himself to it? It made no sense. She wanted to ask again, but his silence warned her not to push further. Still, she felt a strange power in her chest. For the first time, she saw not just a monster, but a prisoner of his own rules. The day passed slowly. Lyra was taken on a walk through the fortress, always with guards at her side. She saw alien soldiers training with weapons that glowed like lightning. She saw halls filled with trophies from conquered worlds, statues, banners, and broken machines. Everywhere she looked, she saw victory, but also emptiness. There was no laughter, no joy, only discipline and silence. It felt less like a home and more like a cage. That night, when she returned to the chamber, she found the general waiting. He was not in armor, but in dark robes, his face partly hidden in shadow. "You are restless," he said, watching her pace the room. "Of course I am," she replied. "I am a prisoner." "You are alive," he answered. "Others would envy you." "I do not envy myself," she said sharply. Her defiance made the guards at the door shift nervously. But Kale raised a hand and they remained silent. "Do not test me," he warned, his voice suddenly cold. "Then stop hiding behind your law," she fired back. The chamber fell silent, her words hanging in the air like a blade. The general's expression darkened, but then softened. He stepped closer, his eyes unreadable. "You are not the first to challenge me," he said quietly. "But you may be the last." Her heart pounded, but she did not step back. "I will not be broken," she whispered. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt heavy, like the moment before a storm. Finally, Kale turned away. "You speak as if you understand strength," he said. "But strength is not shouting against fear. Strength is carrying the weight of loss." Her brow furrowed, confused. "What loss?" she asked. But the general gave no answer. Instead, he left the chamber, his cloak trailing behind him. The door closed with a deep echo, leaving her with more questions than answers. That night, Lyra lay awake again. Her anger kept her strong, but her mind was restless. She thought about his words, about the shadow of grief in his voice. She began to wonder if the general's law was not only about power, but about pain. Some wound in his past, some truth he refused to face, and maybe, just maybe, that truth was the only weapon she had against him. In the silence of the fortress, Lyra made a vow. She would not live as a slave. She would not be another nameless human in the general's story. She would find the truth of his law, and when she found it, she would use it, not only to survive, but to break the chains that bound both of them. The fortress never truly slept, even in the dead of night. The sound of boots echoed through the metal halls. Alien voices spoke in sharp tones. The clash of weapons rang from the training yards. But inside Kale's chambers, silence ruled. Lyra lay awake on the wide bed, staring at the ceiling carved with glowing lines. She could not sleep, not with questions burning in her mind. The general's words from the night before still echoed. Strength is carrying the weight of loss. What loss, she thought? What wound was deep enough to chain even a conqueror? She needed answers, but asking him directly was useless. Cale spoke like a wall of stone, strong and unbreakable. If the truth existed, she would have to find it elsewhere. The next day she began to notice the whispers. Not the general's voice, but the soldiers and servants who worked in the fortress. Whenever she walked past, their words would hush. Their eyes followed her carefully. At first she thought it was only fear or curiosity, but then she heard fragments. Small pieces of stories carried like smoke. Another human, one soldier muttered. Always the same law, another replied. She looks like her, a servant whispered before being silenced. Lyra's heart raced at those words, like her. Who was the woman they meant that night? When the guards outside her chamber grew lazy, she crept to the edge of the door. She pressed her ear against the cold surface and listened. The guards were speaking softly, their voices drifting through the cracks. Do you think she knows? One asked. No. The general never speaks of it, the other replied. But the council knows, the soldiers know. We all know it was love once and it ended in blood. Lyra froze. Her breath caught in her throat, so it was true, Cale had loved before. And if the whispers were right, it had been a human. Suddenly his law made sense in a cruel way. Share my bed, but never my heart. It was not just power. It was protection. Protection against feeling again. Against losing again. Her thoughts churned like a storm. If Cale had loved a human once and she had died, who had killed her? The council, the soldiers, Cale himself? The question stabbed at her heart. But she knew she could not stop now if she wanted to survive. She needed the whole truth. Days passed, and she began to gather more fragments. From the servants who cleaned the halls. From the soldiers who bragged after drinking alien fire wine. She pieced together a broken tale long ago. During the first war with humans, Cale had taken a woman into his fortress, not as a prisoner but as something else. He had defied his council for her, given her protection, even affection. But the council had called it weakness. And weakness was punished, the woman was taken away, and Cale returned from the council chambers with blood on his hands and silence in his eyes. Every whisper ended the same way. No one dared to say how she died, only that she did not return. And after that day, Cale created the law, a law that allowed closeness but forbade the one thing that could destroy him again. Love one night, Lyra wandered further than she ever had. She followed a servant through the shadowed corridors, careful to stay hidden. The path led her to a forgotten hall deep beneath the fortress there. She found something strange, an alcove with carvings, old and covered in dust. At its center lay a small object, half buried in shadow. She reached for it and lifted it into the dim blue light. It was a locket, human-made, simple and fragile compared to alien steel. Inside was a faded image of a young woman. Smiling, a human woman, Lyra's breath shook in her chest. This was proof of the whispers, proof of the general's hidden wound. But why was it hidden here, far away from the chambers above? Did Cale keep it here to bury the past, or had someone else hidden it from him? Her fingers closed around the locket, and she slipped it into her clothes. The weight of it was small, but the danger was heavy. If Cale discovered she had it, her life would end. That night, she returned to the chamber and waited. When Cale entered, his eyes scanned the room as always. But this time she met his gaze without fear. She wanted to confront him, to show him the locket and demand the truth. But something in his face stopped her. A shadow, a silence that spoke of pain even without words. Instead, she held her secret close. She would wait for the right moment. The truth was hers now, and with it came a dangerous power. As the fortress slept around her, Lyra lay awake with the locket pressed to her chest. The whispers had given her answers, but also new questions. If Cale had loved once, could he love again? If the council had killed once, would they kill again? And if his law was a shield to protect his heart, what would happen if she broke it? The fortress walls seemed to tremble with secrets. And Lyra knew she was no longer just a prisoner. She had become something more. A spark in the dark, a threat to a law written in blood. And in the silence of the alien night, she made another vow. She would not only learn the truth, she would use it, even if it meant setting fire to the general's law. The locket burned like fire against Lyra's skin. She kept it hidden under her clothes. Close to her heart, every time she touched it, she felt both fear and strength. Fear because the secret could cost her life. Strength because it was proof that the whispers were true. The great General Kyle, the alien conqueror, had once loved a human. Days passed, and Lyra watched him more carefully. She noticed the small cracks in his silence, the way his eyes lingered on her when he thought she did not see, the way his voice lowered when he spoke of loss. He was not just a cold commander, he was a man trapped in his own law, a man who had buried his past but could not erase it. One night when the fortress was quiet, Kyle entered her chamber without armor. He looked less like a general and more like a shadow of himself. His eyes were tired, his shoulders heavy. Lyra gathered her courage. She could not stay silent any longer from her clothes. She pulled the locket and held it out. "Whose face is this?" she asked softly. Kyle froze, his breath catching in his throat. For the first time, the general looked unprepared. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the locket, but Lyra pulled it back, refusing to let go. "Tell me," she demanded. "Tell me who she was." His jaw tightened, his eyes turning dark. "Where did you find this?" His voice was low, almost dangerous. "In your fortress," she replied.
"Hidden in the shadows just like your truth." Silence fell between them.
Heavy and sharp, Kyle turned away, his cloak dragging across the floor. "She was human," he finally admitted, his voice breaking the silence like a blade. "Her name was Alara." Lyra's heart raced at the name. So it was true, the general had loved. And it had not been a rumor. It had been real. "She was brave," Kale continued, his tone distant. "She walked into my fortress as you did, unafraid. Defiant. I tried to protect her," his voice grew harder. "But my council saw her as weakness. They saw me as unfit to lead." Lyra listened closely, every word cutting deeper. "What happened to her?" she asked. Her voice low, Kale's hands clenched into fists. "They took her," he said, "and they ended her life." Lyra's chest tightened. So this was the broken past that shaped his law. Not just power, not just pride, but grief, a wound so deep that even time could not close it. "And you did nothing," she whispered, unable to hold back her anger. Kale's eyes snapped to hers, blazing with fury. "I did everything," he growled. "But even a general cannot fight his own council." His voice shook with rage, but also with shame. For the first time, Lyra saw him not as an untouchable conqueror, but as a man haunted by his own failure. He had created the law not to control others, but to protect himself. If no one touched his heart again, no one could rip it away. But in protecting himself, he had become a prisoner of his own grief. The chamber grew silent once more. Lyra held the locket tightly, her anger slowly softening into something else. Pity, perhaps, or understanding. "You carry her with you," she said gently. Not in chains, but in silence. Kale's face hardened, but his eyes betrayed the truth. "Yes," he said at last, "and that is why you must never try to take her place." His words struck her like a blow. He was warning her, pushing her away before the bond could grow. But Lyra felt something stronger rising in her chest. If Alara's death had broken him, maybe truth and courage could heal him. Maybe his law could be broken. Not with weapons, but with heart. That night, Kale left without another word, but his silence was different now. It was no longer the silence of a ruler looking down on his prisoner. It was the silence of a man standing at the edge of a memory he could not escape. And Lyra knew the battle ahead would not be fought only with blades or armies. It would be fought with truth, with trust, with defiance of the law itself. As dawn lit the fortress walls, Lyra stared at the locket in her hand. She had uncovered the broken past, but the danger had only begun. If the council had killed once to stop love, they would kill again. And if Kale chose his heart over his law, the galaxy itself might turn against him. Yet Lyra whispered a vow to herself. "I will not die as Alara did," she said, her voice steady. "I will fight, not for chains, not for laws, but for truth." The locket glowed faintly in the morning light. And in that moment, Lyra knew her path was no longer survival alone. It was change that would challenge the law, change that would challenge even the general himself. The locket never left Lyra's hands, even when she hid it beneath her clothes. She felt its weight pressing against her chest. It was not only a reminder of the woman Kale had once loved, but also a key to his silence, a key to his law. She had touched his wound, and now she could not turn back. Kale avoided her for days. He came to the chamber only to speak a few cold words before leaving again, but his silence spoke louder than his voice. Lyra could see the way his eyes flickered toward her, Then quickly away, he was fighting something inside himself. Something that even a general could not control. One evening, a storm broke across the alien skies. Lightning split the heavens. Thunder shook the fortress walls. The soldiers rushed to their posts, but Lyra stood by the window. Staring at the storm, it reminded her of home, of nights when the sky raged but her family sat safe together. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She did not hear Cale enter the chamber, but she felt his presence like a shadow behind her. "You cry," he said, his voice low. Lyra turned sharply. "Ashamed to show weakness. I remember my family," she whispered. "I wonder if they are alive, if they pray for me." Cale's gaze hardened, but then softened. "Hope is dangerous," he said. "It makes you weak." "No," she replied quickly. "It makes me human." The words hung between them like a challenge. For the first time, Kyle did not argue. He simply stood beside her, both of them staring into the storm. That night something changed. Cale did not leave the chamber as quickly as before. Instead, he spoke not of war or laws, but of his homeworld. He described mountains of silver stone and rivers that glowed with blue fire. He spoke of battles fought long before humans even knew his people existed. Lyra listened, surprised by the softness in his voice. He was not only a conqueror, he was a man shaped by loss, pride, and endless duty. As the days passed, the bond between them grew. It was unspoken but real. Cale began to linger longer, asking questions about human songs, human food, human laughter, and Lyra, though afraid, answered him. She sang softly one night a song from her childhood. The alien guard shifted uneasily outside the door, but Cale listened in silence. When she finished, he whispered, "I have never heard such a thing." And though his face remained stern, there was something in his eyes, a warmth that had not been there before. But whispers travel fast. The soldiers began to notice. The council began to watch. Rumors spread that the general's law was being tested, perhaps even broken one night. A servant warned Lyra in hushed tones. "The council does not forgive twice," he said. "They killed once to stop his heart. They will kill again." Lyra's blood ran cold. The danger was no longer hidden. It was moving closer every day. That evening, Cale returned, his expression darker than the storm. "The council has spoken," he said, his voice sharp. "They say you are a threat, that you must be removed." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "Removed," she whispered. "You mean killed?" Kyle did not answer, but his silence was answer enough. "They test me," he said finally. "They test my loyalty." He turned away, his fists clenched. "If I defy them again, I will lose everything." Lyra stepped closer, her voice steady despite her fear. "Then let them take everything," she said. "What is power worth if you live without a heart?" Cale's eyes blazed with fury, but also pain. "You do not understand," he growled. "I carry the blood of thousands. I carry the weight of a people. If I break, they break with me." "And yet you are already broken," Lyra whispered, holding up the locket. "You carry this because you cannot let go, because you cannot stop feeling, no matter what your law says." For a long time, Cale did not move. The silence stretched so heavy it felt like the walls themselves were waiting. Then, slowly, his hand reached for the locket. But instead of taking it, he closed her fingers around it. "Keep it," he said quietly. "You are braver than she was. Braver than I am." His voice shook, and for a moment the great general seemed fragile, almost human. But outside the chamber, shadows moved. The council's spies had heard enough. The whispers that once spoke of the past now carried news of the present. The general's law was bending, maybe even breaking, and the punishment would be swift. That night, as Lyra tried to sleep, she could not. Her heart raced with both fear and something else. A bond had grown between her and Cale, forbidden and dangerous, but real. She knew the council would not rest. They would strike soon, and when they did, she would stand beside him, not as a prisoner, but as something more, something the council feared more than any weapon. A human who had touched the heart of their greatest general. The fortress felt different. The air was heavy. The guards stood more rigid, their eyes sharper. Every corner seemed filled with whispers that stopped when Lyra passed. The council was watching, and she knew it. Her heart pounded with fear, but she refused to show it if she acted weak. They would break her before the general could act. Cale entered her chamber that night with no armor. No cloak, only his presence filled the room. Heavy and grim, his jaw was set, his hands clenched. Lyra had seen him in battle, strong and unshaken, but now she saw a different man, a man trapped between duty and something far deeper. "They have spoken," he said, his voice like stone. "The council has ordered your execution." The words hit her like a blade. Her legs trembled, but she forced herself to stand tall. "So this is their test," she whispered. "Yes," Kyle replied, his eyes burning. "They believe if I let you die, I prove my loyalty. And if you refuse," she asked, her voice trembling, "they will strip me of command, brand me as traitor, and take everything I built." Silence wrapped around them. The storm outside rumbled, lightning flashing across the alien skies. Kale turned his gaze to the window, his voice lower now. "I made a law to protect myself from this. From you," his fists tightened. "But you, human, you defied it. You broke into my silence." Lyra's heart raced, yet she stepped closer. "And will you let me die for a law you made to protect your fear?" Her words cut through him. For a moment Kale said nothing, his face unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice heavy with grief. "I lost one heart before, and it destroyed me. If I lose another, I may lose myself forever." Lyra lifted the locket, pressing it into his hand. "Then do not lose me," she whispered. "Fight for me. Fight for yourself. Fight for what they fear most." Kyle closed his hand around the locket. His body trembling with conflict, he turned away. His shadow stretched long across the wall. "You do not understand," he said. "My people follow because they see strength. If they see weakness, they will turn. They will burn this world and every human on it." "Then show them strength," she replied, her voice sharp. "Not the strength of chains and fear, but the strength of choosing your own heart." The chamber doors burst open suddenly. Council guards in black armor stepped inside, their weapons glowing with blue fire. Their leader's voice echoed like thunder. "By order of the council, the human is to be executed at dawn." Kyle's soldiers froze, torn between loyalty to their general and fear of the council. The room grew still, every breath heavy, every second sharp. Kale did not move. His face was carved in stone, but his eyes burned. Lyra stood tall, though her heart pounded so loud she thought they would hear it. The council guard stepped closer, chains in his hands. "Do not resist, General," he warned. "Your law forbids the heart. It is broken now, and she must die." The words pierced Kale like arrows, his law, his shield, his curse, now turned against him. Slowly, Kale stepped forward, towering over the guards. "You dare test me in my own hall," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. The guards stiffened but did not retreat. "The council demands proof," the leader said. "Prove you are not weak. End her life yourself." Lyra's breath caught. Her knees nearly gave way. Kale turned toward her, his eyes locked on hers for a heartbeat. She could not read him. Would he obey or would he fight? Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. "Your heart was never lost," she whispered. "You just locked it away." The chamber pulsed with silence. The guards waited, weapons ready. Kale's hand moved slowly toward his blade. Lyra's heart froze. Was this the end? Would the general obey his law or break it once and for all? With a sudden roar, Kale drew his weapon. The soldiers flinched, expecting him to strike the human, but instead, his blade flashed against the council guards. Energy cracked through the air as the first soldier fell. Kale's voice thundered across the chamber. "My law is broken," he declared. "My heart is mine to give, and no council will command it." Chaos erupted. The guards rushed forward. Weapons blazing, Kale fought like a storm, each strike fueled by fury and defiance. Lyra ducked behind the great bed, her heart racing as fire and steel filled the chamber. She watched as the general cut down his enemies. No longer their servant, but their rebel. When the last guard fell, silence returned, broken only by the crackle of weapons cooling. Kale stood tall, his blade dripping with light. He turned to Lyra, his chest rising and falling with heavy breath. "You see now," he said, his voice low. "There is no turning back." Lyra stepped toward him, her fear replaced by fire. "Then we fight," she said, her voice steady. Together, the fortress shook with distant echoes. More soldiers would come, more battles would rise. But for the first time, Kale had chosen not his law, not his council. He had chosen his heart, and the galaxy would burn because of it. The fortress was no longer silent. The cries of alarm rang through the halls, drums of war pounding against the walls. Soldiers rushed to arms, their boots shaking the steel floors. The rebellion of their general had begun, and there was no going back. Kale stood in the center of the chamber, his blade glowing. The bodies of council guards lay at his feet. His chest heaved, his eyes blazing with fire. Lyra stood beside him, trembling but unbroken. The air was filled with smoke and sparks. But her gaze held only him. He had chosen at last, and his choice was her. The doors burst open. More soldiers pouring inside, but this time, Kale's voice thundered louder than any blade. "Those who follow me stand now," he commanded. For a moment silence, then some soldiers stepped forward, kneeling to him. Others stayed frozen, fear tying them to the council's will, and still others raised their weapons against him. The chamber erupted in chaos once more. Kale fought like a storm, his strikes clean and merciless. Those who had once feared his law now feared his freedom. Lyra ducked and moved, using shadows to avoid the clash of fire and steel. But she was not powerless. She hurled broken pieces of alien metal, distracted enemies, and even shielded Kale once. Her courage burned brighter than her fear, but the fortress itself seemed to rise against them. Sirens wailed, gates sealed. Soldiers poured in wave after wave. Kale fought fiercely, yet even he could not face an endless army. "We cannot stay here," Lyra shouted, her voice cutting through the roar of battle. "They will bury us in this place." Kale struck down another guard and pulled her close. "Then we escape," he said, his voice unshaken. "Alive or dead, we leave together." They fought their way through the endless corridors. Each step forward was a storm of blood and fire. The walls that once held Kale's power now trapped him in chains of war. But he broke through them, strike by strike. Behind them, the fortress burned. Ahead, the night sky opened, filled with alien ships circling like vultures. On the landing platforms, the council's elite waited, warriors in black armor, stronger and faster than the rest. At their center stood the High Counselor, his voice sharp as a blade. "You are our pride, Kale," he said coldly. "Now you are our shame." Kale raised his blade, his voice like thunder. "I was never your pride. I was your prisoner." And now his gaze cut toward Lyra. "I am free." The final battle exploded across the platform. Blades clashed, fire streaked across the night. Kale fought with fury, but the counselors struck with deadly precision. Lyra hid behind the wreckage of a broken craft, her eyes never leaving him. Every strike he made seemed to carry her life as well as his own. But even Kale began to falter. Too many enemies, too much weight. The council pressed closer, their voices mocking. "Your law is broken, General, and soon your heart will be too." Lyra could not stay hidden. She ran forward, grabbing a fallen weapon. Strange and heavy in her hands, she fired wildly, bolts of light tearing across the platform. The soldiers turned in shock, giving Kale the opening he needed. He roared and struck down two counselors with a single blow. But the High Counselor remained powerful and cold. He moved with speed that even Kale struggled to match. Steel rang against steel, sparks lighting the night. The counselor pressed Kale to the edge. His blade inches from victory, Lyra screamed his name, her voice breaking the night. In that moment, Kale's strength returned. Not from duty, not from fear, but from the bond he had sworn to protect. With a final strike, Kale drove his blade through the counselor's chest. The enemy fell, his voice fading into silence. The battlefield froze, soldiers staring in disbelief. Kale stood tall, his blade dripping with fire. His breath heavy, he raised his voice for all to hear. "My law is broken," he declared. "My heart is mine to give, and I give it freely." His soldiers wavered, some dropping their weapons, others kneeling. The council's rule shattered in that moment, not by war alone, but by the defiance of one heart. But victory came with a price. Kale was wounded, his strength fading. Lyra rushed to his side, catching him as he fell to one knee. "You cannot fall now," she whispered. Tears burning her eyes, Kale looked at her, his face weary but his gaze alive. "I have fought for empires," he said softly, "but never for myself." Until now, alarms still blared, more ships moved in the sky. The war was not over, but they had broken free. Kale's reign as general was finished, his power stripped. But in its place, something greater had been born, a bond stronger than law, stronger than fear. Together, they fled into the night, exiles, hunted but unbroken. As their stolen craft carried them away, Lyra held his hand tightly. The stars stretched endless before them, a future unknown, dangerous yet alive. The law that once chained him was gone, and in its place only one truth remained, that even in a galaxy built on war, the heart could still rebel.